I've jumped ahead a little bit and kind of fleshed out the scene a little bit with some of the techniques that we've been talking about. I've not done anything that I haven't explained in those kind of simple preceding steps. So if you want to have a look around, I'll talk you through what I've done. Some of this should be pretty familiar to you. So in the case of the buildings, etc., we've already talked through what we're doing here. You can see in the background, I've used a bit of just an extended sphere, like to kind of wrap this texture onto. So it gives it the illusion of some of this kind of form, even though it's nothing like that really. It only works obviously from this sort of perspective. As soon as you try and go around here, it completely breaks. But we know what our camera's going to do. We can control what we want our camera to do, so that's not going to be an issue. I might just turn off the ground in the background just for a second, just because they can be quite distracting with all these kind of crazy amounts of polygons and textures on them. So if I just disable those for a second, you can see now what I've done. So let's go through some of these individual buildings. On this one, very straightforward. I've just mapped a kind of that transparent version. Let's have a quick look. I can show you, just talk you through it. I've just taken these elements. You can see how in here, I actually separated out the chimney stacks themselves. So they're individual elements that, if we look back at the Blender file now, they're layered in depth and space as well, so that we have parallax on them as well if we need it. So we can get that kind of effect. Slightly unnecessary in this case, but it wasn't that much extra work, and it was just part of the fun really for me. So you can see here we're using the Zeppelin, we've got this factory, we've got the chimneys. These other elements are just very simple, like we talked about already. It's just that the alpha texture, the PNG, applied to these very simple geometries. In the case of this section here, you can see, if I go back to Photoshop, let's find that particular piece. Not that one, not that one, this one, this rubble section here. I've just taken that and applied it to a bit of geometry. There we go, let's focus in. It's got a bit of a volume to it, so it looks like that kind of broken edge. Very simple, as you can see, it's just cubes with this kind of technique of camera projections, etc. And if I go around, the only thing where I've kind of gone a little bit overboard, maybe relative, is this section here. So hopefully you can see what I've done here from the camera point of view. I've just modeled out like a cube and then just kind of cut away and extruded. And so yeah, I just created geometry that was roughly in line with the kind of what I could see on the image texture, and just use that projection again. So that is a bit more complicated, but it's the same techniques we've discussed already. So as you can see, it kind of breaks quite easily. You could go in and fix up more of that texture so it does work a bit better, but that's pretty good for me. I'm not looking for things to be much better than this at this stage for this piece. But it just shows you maybe, if you wanted to put more into this, you can get some pretty interesting effects quite easily. And you can see the guys here now, they're all separated out. They're their own people. You can see I've also pulled out sections of the rubble, so that's now got a bit of depth. This section of rubble here, for example, kind of extruded a little bit towards the camera. So again, if the camera kind of moves around, there's a bit of that depth to it. It's not just a flat face. You can see here, it's not going to fool anyone for very long if they start really looking closely. But for the kind of effects we're looking for, it's going to be pretty compelling. Here's all our main characters and all our main elements. We have our goat, obviously. Nothing particularly complicated about this character, but doing his job. And that's the majority of the scene. So if I just kind of turn on the background again, and then zoom out, again, still quite messy, but from the camera's point of view, things are now starting to look pretty good. If I select our camera, which I believe I've set up this one to be our camera, Let's make this our 3D view to the side. Just get a cheeky little perspective view in here, maybe. Solid. Yeah, there's our camera. If I just move this around, there you go. Now you can kind of see exactly the kind of effects we're able to get here. Very happy with that. Let's zoom on this for a second and take it for a ride. Look at that. Hard to believe we started all this from a very simple, just 2D image in Photoshop. And now we can kind of scoot around and do all sorts of interesting things. So some of those interesting things will be doing things like animation. So if I think, for example, on this one, yes, we've added a little bit of camera animation here. You can see the characters animating as well, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second, but this is what we're doing here. And as well as that, because we now have a scene that we can place cameras in, even though our original concept is just from this point of view, we're not limited to that. So if you see, I've created a few other cameras here. So let's just, let's have fun with these. I'm just going to make things a little bit more obvious. If I move around, let's look at one of the other cameras. Here we go. I've created more cameras, put some keyframes on. You can see the animation. You can see the camera tracks, focus pulling from him into the background. And I said, now we have a little set, like a movie set, and we can just place cameras around and start doing interesting little shots like this, you know, kind of like that final moment where he's locked onto the target and that Zeppelin's like days are numbered. I think I even have a little goat close up here somewhere. There we go. Goat close up, you know, for a bit of drama. All the goat fans. And that's it really. So we have our kind of wide establishing shot, and then we can cut into various different other shots for moments of drama and goat-based tension. We've got a lot of flexibility, and the illusion is holding together pretty well. So just to kind of go over some of the things we're doing here, let's pull out again. If I focus in on our character here, and can I get the bazooka and this guy? Yeah, here we go. So we'll just isolate them for a second, and you'll see here that I've got some animations going on here. We've got the cape waving, which I might go into a little bit of detail about, but there's a bit more kind of full explanation on that in the full course, but we can dive into it a little bit. And just some simple keyframe animation on the arms here. Let's maybe have a little chat about a few like simple animation things, and that'll take us through to the next bit. Now we can maybe start having a little chat about some very simple animation techniques. So if I look in here, this is our camera view. I'm hiding the background just a moment, just to kind of simplify things a little bit. But yeah, let's look at our camera. Again, I'll hide the background. It's getting very noisy there. So we want to introduce some kind of camera movements and options of the camera, because as I said, we've built this scene now, and we're not limited to that 2D image we started with. We can place things around and move things around. So just as a starting point, let's just take the kind of this starting point as the camera position. Make sure we're in our kind of animation. That is correct. Yes, I've remembered. Up here, we're going to press I in the viewport. I think it's changed in later versions of Blender, but I just want to do location rotation. That's our first keyframe. We're going to keep this simple. I'm going to move to the end of the animation, and let's just move the camera to the side. Let's just do, is a technical term a tracking shot? Maybe. I know Dolly's kind of moving in and out, I believe. Let's call it a tracking shot. We're just going sideways. And let's just press location rotation. So now we've got 2 keyframes, and we can see that camera moving along. So if I go into our camera view here, there we go. Now we're in the right camera. Turn on the ground there. So you can see we got some issues with the sides clipping here. So what I'll do is at this end frame, I'm going to bring in this viewport here. I'm going to frame the camera. And then from the top, I'm just going to rotate it until we can't see any of those problem areas. And I might even move it forward a little bit. and then just press location rotation. Just see what we're getting now. So I can see as well, towards the end, we're seeing around the side of this section here. So what I might do is take that camera and just increase the focal length a little bit so it's a little tighter. And maybe at this start position, I'm going to bring it to the side, like so. Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Location rotation, and just press play. Pretty good. That's basically, animation. There's a lot more to it than that, but this is a good start. So there's a few things you might notice. So if we go to our something called the graph editor, which is here, if I do that, normalize, you'll see that this is a curve. So that means by default, when we animate, it's going to start gradually, accelerate, and then slow down gradually as well. That might be fine. I quite like it for this shot, but if you don't want that, a quick thing to do is select our keyframes, press T, I think it is, yes, and change that to linear. And that'll just mean the camera moves at constant speed from the very first frame. Slightly different, but just something you should know. That's very basic overview of some of these simple camera techniques we'll be using. So what else can we do? Let's stop that animation for a second. If we want to go in and kind of give a little bit of like, I don't know, a handheld steady cam, shaky cam, war footage feel into this thing, we can do something, which I'm hoping I remember how to do, which is add a noise modifier onto this animation. So in a second, we'll go through the process of doing just that. Okay, here we go. And in the graph editor, which is what we have here, we've got our camera selected, obviously, in our viewport. Let's make this slightly bigger so we can see what's going on. And then we've got all the kind of X, Y, Z. It's moving, it's rotating. Maybe it's not doing any of those things. But we know it's moving across the X, and we've got that visible here. We can add modifiers to these things, so we don't have to hand animate everything. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but I know the noise one is pretty fun. I'm going to add a little split here so I can put our animation controls visible on screen, not there. Let's try that again. Horizontal is the one I wanted. And make that the timeline. There's our animation player. So if I play that, you should see, yeah, that's looking pretty garbage. But we can tweak that a little bit, so we know it's a bit much. So the scale is a bit harsh, so we know we want to maybe make it not quite so jittery. So that's kind of swinging it back and forth on the x-axis. So maybe want the effect to be a little less strong. So let's just bring the strength down. And again, you can see it's still quite tough. But we can bring down the influence as well. Let's just make that really low influence. So that's going to add a slight bit of variation and randomness to that motion path. But we can do that in a few other of these axes as well. So if I go to, let's just look at the local. Yeah, let's try a bit of rotation on the x-axis. So there's nothing there at the moment. Let's just do another noise and kind of see what this is doing. Okay, that's horrible, obviously, but we're in the right ballpark. So let's turn the scale up again. Again, apologies if this is breaking anyone's brain. And take the strength down. And see what happens. Okay. Again, I feel like we could just turn down the influence of the strength and we're going to get something kind of usable. Yeah, there we go. So we're adding a little bit of random noise to it as if someone's kind of tracking across some like rubbly ground or whatever. a fun thing about this as well is like once you've got like a noise modifier, you kind of like, if you press this button here, you can copy it. I can then go to another one of these, which maybe, let's just copy and paste all over the place and see what happens. And we'll just click on this one here, and that's a paste. So even if you can't see it there, that's just been applied. So let's ramp that up a little bit, or even just the influence. Let's make the influence 1. Let's see what this does. Okay, so we got a bit of wobble. Again, massively overdone. Maybe bring the scale in a little bit so it's a little bit noisier. And then we can bring this strength down again, just so we're not blowing anyone's brains open with like motion sickness. But that's kind of looking pretty cool. Okay, that's not too bad. So let's say that we're happy with our rotations and our noise modifier there. So that's a nice little easy technique to kind of add a little bit of motion and realism without being an animator. That's the thing. I'm not an animator. I know a few things, and again, I apologize to any animators who are watching this because this must be painful. But it's just a few things non-animators can do to kind of bump things up a little bit without like making it a whole new skill you have to learn. These are just some very simple techniques. So what's next? Let's maybe look at a few other effects while we're in the camera and see what we can do there. So while we're talking about cameras, maybe now's a chance to talk about some of the effects we can do in camera, so to speak. So what I'll do is show you maybe some depth of field stuff, and we can have a little talk about that. The first thing I'm going to need to do to get some depth of field, let's jump out here. I'm going to need an empty, which is, again, we can just do add empty. That's shown up here, which is great. Let's put that somewhere we can, yeah, there we go. We got the empty there. Why do I need that? Well, you'll find out very soon. So let's, again, Blender can be, a bit UI crazy, that we need to see a couple of things going on here. And I hope I have enough room without it being too tiny for people to see what's going on. So we've created this empty. We have our camera, which is here, I believe. Camera tutorial. Yes, this is the one we want. Let's go into our camera view, turn on our rendered view so we can kind of see what's going on. So right now, we don't have any depth of field. And if you don't know what that technique is, it just talks about how you can change what areas are in focus or out of focus in a real camera by changing some settings. As a quick example, let's just turn the default setting down, loads. There you go. You can start to see what that's doing. Certain areas will be in focus, certain areas won't be. So we can control this though. So let's show you how to control that in an easy way. I like to use an empty. There's other ways of doing this, but like we're going to pick focus on object here. I'll just click on this so you can see it. And I'm going to use the eyedropper to pick the empty we just created. So to show you how that's working, I'm going to ramp up this effect again. The smaller this number, the blurrier things get. I don't know if that's counterintuitive. But if I select the empty, which is now here, there we go. Let's move this around the scene. So you can see how we can draw the focus of the camera in and out of the scene just by moving this. Roll all the way to the back and right to the front again, or too far in that case. And this is a really powerful technique, and one you see like in real cinematography. And we can kind of do a pretty good approximation of it using just EEVEE and a few of these things. So let's bring this guy back a little further. Maybe we want to start the camera focusing on this character here. So I believe, let's just double check here. Yeah, this is the right sort of ballpark. So that, just for clarity's sake, that's our empty there. I hope this is legible. There. So that's our empty, more or less focused on our main character here. So if we play our animation that we just created, oh, buffering, give it a second. So you can see our camera is now just in focus on that character. So we're going to go back to the start. I'm going to select the camera, which is this one. And we're going to make this depth of field a little less extreme. Let's make it just 1 or something. So it's we get a little bit of softness in the background, but it's not crazy. But what we're going to do now is, again, we're just going to do some simple keyframing and control this kind of depth of field effect as we move through the scene. So we're going to set some keyframes on our empty, which again is here now. And I want it to be kind of focusing on this guy for the first few frames. So maybe from around here, 30. I'm going to put a keyframe in by, again, just hovering over the window, the 3D viewport, pressing the I button or whatever it is for whatever version of Blender you're using, adding our location rotation keyframe, which hopefully you'll see that showing up here. There you go, there's our keyframes. And then we're going to move through the animation, and we're going to like maybe around here while I've pushed it back to where that middle guy is. Maybe we want to kind of focus on his story at this point. So that's where he is in this viewport. So let's drag that over here. And again, just to confirm that's moved, I'm going to press I, location rotation. You can see the keyframes have started to populate the graph editor. You can see them here. So again, by default, this is a curve, which you can kind of see there. I'm going to leave that for now. That doesn't really matter what happens when we play this back. And watch how this depth of field changes from the start of the animation, and then we'll pull out and start to focus on this guy as we go through it. And there you can see them coming into focus now, and the foreground objects becoming slightly more blurry. So that's a really fun extension of some of the creative techniques we've been talking about. So another tool for your repertoire. You can see as well, I've put a bit of animation on the Zeppelin that's moving slightly through the scene. Now it's doing a drifting. That's not just the camera motion. Again, just adding a couple of keyframes and allowing it to do its thing. So yeah, I think that kind of covers that. And we'll look at a few other things we can kind of talk about on top of this as well. It's time for the compositor. We've got a few little things we can do in here quickly. Again, I don't want to go deep dive because I'm not a deep dive person for the compositor. I know there's a couple of quick things we can throw on to what we've already done, and that will show you a few cool little tricks if you haven't already done this before. So we're in the compositing window. You might need to enable nodes up here. If you haven't, just make a 3D view over this side. Turn on your compositor to be visible like in the camera, otherwise you might not see these effects. And then we're just going to do add, which again is just Shift A, search, and lens distortion. I'm just going to drop that in. You can see the line is turning white there, which means it'll connect it up automatically. And if I start dragging this, you can get that kind of chromatic aberration effect. Again, quite extreme. If I start playing this, really fun that you can see all this in real time though. It's an amazing facility to have. Not having to render all these out to kind of see what the effect looks like. You can just see it live. If your character's having a psychic flashback, then this is obviously perfect. It might be a bit strong for us right now. So I certainly wouldn't mind just a little bit of it at the edges to kind of break up the image, discolor it slightly. That's just enough here. If I hover over this node and press M, I think, M for mute, you'll see it'll kind of grays it out and it's deactivated. And you can kind of toggle it on and off to kind of see the effect of what you're doing. So let's have a look around, see what else it's doing. Again, you'll see it distorts the image slightly as well. Oh, don't want to do that. But apart from that, yeah, I think that's kind of all right. I might just amp up a little bit so we can see it in the actual scene a little bit more clearly. But you adjust to taste, basically. A few other ones we can add, like stuff like glare. So this isn't super bright right now, this scene. There's not a huge amount of light sources, but you've got a few different options here. If I pick the glow, this threshold, I think the lower this is, you'll find that things will start to blow out easier. So you can see, for example, this is kind of basically like a color dodge layer in Photoshop, which kind of adds a really intense kind of neon glow. It's maybe a bit intense for my liking right now. There's probably a way of reducing that in some way, but right now I'll just leave it on at some degree just so we can kind of see the effects in the scene as we're kind of passing through. And there's all sorts of other things you can do in here. Again, some basics include color balancing and correction. Let's try this. There's a few different modes in this, depending on who your tutorial person is. They'll tell you different things. But yeah, you can tint the shadows. You start basic color grading. Kind of really colorizing the image. I'm not a colorist in this sense, so it's not my forte, doing color grading, but it's a really powerful facility to have, as I said, for free in real time. You can create like really interesting and crazy looks. This is not the best example of it, but can I do curves as well? Like RGB curves. There we go. Classic RGB curves. Everyone's favorite from Photoshops, etc. Which allow you to kind of tweak contrasts and shadow and brightness settings and all that sort of stuff. So again, you can have quite a lot of control over your final look of your image with all these things. So again, just to contrast without some of these on, I'll just press M to toggle. And again, you've got real-time color adjustments again that you would maybe have to do like render offline not too long ago, but now it's all real-time and visible as you do it, which is really, really good. So yeah, to your heart's content, play away with some of this stuff. You can add vignettes, you can add all sorts of overlays and animated stuff on top of your image. But for now, I said just a brief glimpse into the power of these. I think I'll just keep a little bit of that chromatic aberration effect towards the edges just to soften it off a little bit, add a bit of like kind of gritty old kind of lens feel. It's a bit overplayed, overused, but right now just something to kind of throw on top of what we got. And if I again just increase that, you can see it's quite extreme. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going this hard on it all the time, but it's a little good tool to have it up your sleeve when you need it, and that's all you need to do. So we kind of covered quite a lot so far, and I think there's a few little bits we can go on to next. So to wrap things up, maybe I thought we'd kind of skip ahead again and show the same scene, just taken a little bit further. I've applied some more of the techniques that are kind of from the full course. They're all displayed and explained in more depth than I can go into here. But you know, they're kind of extras. That the core of the scene, as you've seen, we can build quite easily with all we know so far. I'll maybe quickly talk through some of the stuff that we've got going on. Luckily, the goat is still here. Don't worry about that. We still have the goat. Other stuff we have added are things like flames and sparks. Unfortunately, Blender really is, you know, in my opinion, got very user unfriendly and basic sprites and particle system for like this sort of stuff. There's all sorts of things I would like to be able to do in Blender that I can't. Even with some plugins, I think geometry nodes will come along and save the day gradually, but it's very heartbreaking that there's some very simple effects I was doing on like PlayStation 1 graphics 20 years ago, and it's really difficult to do some simple effects. Things like creating a particle and having it fade over time and change color over time. I'm sure there's geometry node setups and scripts and plugins that will do this, but out of the box, it's difficult, awkward, and not a fun process. So I've had to do some workarounds with some various animation techniques, but you can see some stuff happening here. We've also brought in some like animated bullet tracers. Again, if I kind of just peek behind the curtains, we're just animating a plane with some distortion on it, which is a technique we've talked about a few times in my full tutorial, but very simple. You can see there's a similar sort of thing going on with the fire. I think there is like a version of this where I used an animated movie for this. It just didn't look very good, so I've just used warping textures like that. On our Zeppelin over here, we'll have a little look at this, if I can select it. There we go. Let's zoom in on this guy. You can see I've actually added a spotlight over here as well. That is kind of catching the side of that Zeppelin. Is that visible? You can kind of see it in that area. So as the Zeppelin's moving, it's moving through the beam of this spotlight, which I've added here, which also animates. It's just panning across slightly. As you can see, the scene's a little busy now with all these wireframe overlays. Let's see if I can calm it down a little bit. There we go. And what else have I done? I've taken in a few simple like textures of just clouds. They're not animated. They're not doing anything. They're just sitting there in the background and in between some of the key kind of areas. And they just add a little bit of separation to the scene. Like so. You can kind of see what's going on there. They add a little bit of depth. There's even some in the foreground here. Let's see what we're doing. There's some sparks that I've also animated. We have a spotlight, playing over the scene here. You can see in the middle, it's kind of tracking. I can't select it for some reason. There we go. Almost as if it's following this character, even though he's not moving particularly. And then if I come down to the foreground again, we can see I've got some of those smoke elements here. And again, this one I'm just animating ever so slightly. And these characters, again, we have some bits of motion on the cape and as they're firing their rocket. So we just kind of added these few simple things on top of the stuff we've already established. And we get something that looks a little bit, let's see, have a look if I can jump into these cameras. So there we go, and I'll turn off the overlays. That's our main kind of establishing shot camera. You can see the atmosphere and like the smoke effects really kind of helping separate things out, add a bit of depth. I've got some across the ground here, so it looks like a bit of like horizon fog, low-lying fog in this kind of war scene. And then, as I said before, with this scene, you can kind of create little moments of drama by moving our camera around. We've got a little vignette happening here. These two taking track of this ship and getting ready to fire. And I carry on that idea with a little close-up of them over the shoulder getting ready to fire. So as you can see here, we've got another one of those vignette scenes where we've kind of zoomed in to kind of show the point of view from this character, almost like as he's taking this all-important shot in this enemy Zeppelin that's about to give them all a very bad time if they're not too careful. And that's really the story of how to take this image, make it a 3D scene and bring it to life with, again, some new techniques, the camera projection mainly, and some of the other techniques we've discussed in our other course. So hopefully some of that was of some use to some of you, and that it was interesting in some capacity. The results kind of speak for themselves. If you like the look of this, please do have a go yourself. We'd love to know if anyone does follow along. You can find us on all our kind of socials, I guess, Instagram, etc. Cara, I'm sure we're on there as well soon, and anywhere else you can find us, or in the comments below. Please have a go, post links, ask any questions, and let us know how you're getting on. We'd love to see what people do. So that's it from us for now, I think. I can't think of anything else to go on right now. If there is more, we'll obviously add it in due course. So keep an eye out, and we'll hopefully see everyone and talk to everyone soon. So thanks a lot, and all the best from us here at Brainbug. That's it. We've done it. We've reached the end. Hopefully you're now looking back on an amazing animation that's playing in the corner of your screen while you're watching this. If that's the case, congratulations. Thank you for staying with us this far. I hope you really enjoyed what you've learned with us on this course. If you liked what you saw and you wanted some more, we have a more detailed full course. Again, the link should be downstairs, should be down below, somewhere in the description or wherever it is on whatever platform you're looking at this on. I'm not entirely sure. It's somewhere. Have a look and see if you can find it. There's more information on that page, but it's more kind of techniques to do similar sort of 2D to 3D workflows. And if you've enjoyed this, hopefully you'll get a bit more out of the full course. And if you haven't had enough of Brainbug already, please feel free to follow us on wherever you think we can be found. I think we're on Instagram, we've got a website. More details of those should be somewhere on our profile, and we'd love to see you on there. So please follow us. Let us know how you got on. If you've done any animations, tag us in or hashtag or whatever it is to get our attention. Please do. We always like to see new people's artwork, and we'd love to see what you've been doing with this course. I'm off now. Thanks again, and hopefully I'll see you again for something. So whatever that is, goodbye for now, and thanks from Brainbug.